There's a fire. I don't know how it started. If you can give her some help, it's pretty main street.
Hold on. Give me that address again.
Responders are trained to handle emergencies. The goal is always to prevent loss of life and property. But with electricity, taking the right action is critical to protecting everyone's life, including your own. The focus of this program is to give you an understanding of electric system facilities, so when responding to potential danger, by working with the utility company, the goal of preventing injury whenever possible is achieved. Throughout the program, you'll see a little yellow electric icon pop up, highlighting a point which is extremely important. And at other times, a red electric icon emphasizing conditions which are extremely dangerous. Electricity dominates our lives, the most prevalent form of energy. To understand it, we have to dig a little and get very small. Atoms have electrons flying around them at incredible speeds. By creating a force to drive the electrons from one atom to another, you also release energy and in effect create electricity.
Don't get alarmed that you're about to get a lecture in electrical physics. You're not. But having a basic understanding of electricity can help you deal with it. The problem is, since it's invisible, it's good to compare it to something we're all familiar with, and which is very visible: water.
Electricity and water behave a lot alike. These two jugs each have water in them. But notice that one has a lot more than the other. When we connect a tube to them, notice how the pull of gravity creates pressure, forcing the water from the fuller jug to flow into the other jug. When the two jugs have equal amounts of water, the flow stops. That's where the expression, "water seeks its own level," comes from. With this image fresh in mind, let's see how electricity works in the same way. Think of a battery as having two compartments, each one like the water jugs, only here the fuller side has lots of electrons, and the less full side has only a small number of electrons. I can touch both terminals of the battery, but nothing happens, because like the water jugs, something has to connect the two ends. Only now, instead of a tube, we're making the connection with a metal wire, and like the water, the negatively charged electrons flow toward the other side. When we put something like a bulb between the battery terminals, the flow of electrons puts electricity to work, lighting the bulb. The material in the bulb resists the flow of the electrons through it. This resistance produces heat, and in this case, light. And we'll be returning to this term in a few minutes. Remember how the water stopped flowing when the levels evened out? Same thing here. When the flow of electrons stop, the flashlight dims and soon goes dead. Let's use water again to help understand some other electrical terms. Now, there's nothing coming out of this hose, but there is water and pressure inside. When I open the valve, the force of that pressure releases a spray of water. A wire is similar. The force which causes electrons to flow is called voltage, and like water, the greater the pressure pushing electricity through a line, the higher the voltage. In water terms, the pressure is measured in pounds per square inch. With electricity, pressure is measured in volts. How much water are we using with this hose? Well, that would be measured at how many gallons per minute we'd be using, with a maximum if we opened it up full blast. With electricity, the rate of flow or current is also measured. It's called amperes or amps. And like water, there are only so many amps we can draw through this wire at full capacity. Let's take this example one step further just to make sure it's clear. Standard drinking straw. If I sip normally, I get so much water. But if I use a much wider straw, I get a lot more water with less effort. As with the straws and water, thinner wire has more resistance, which limits how much current can move through it, while a much thicker wire with less resistance can carry much higher currents. Let's examine the light bulb again and shed some light on how resistance affects the flow of electricity. Let's create a light bulb. Two wires connect to a metal conductor, a filament, made of a metal like tungsten. This filament limits or resists the amount of current passing through it, producing heat and light without burning up. Ceramic and glass also make up the light bulb, but unlike the filament, almost totally resist current passing through them and insulate the materials inside. When measured, how much a material resists the flow of current is expressed as ohms. So the filament with low resistance has a low number, but the ceramic and glass surrounding it have an extremely high resistance.
Since resistance is the property of materials to resist the flow of electric current, everything in our environment is affected, even air. Materials which resist current very well are called insulators, and those which let current pass easily are called conductors. Air is a good insulator, and as we mentioned, glass is a good insulator, as are plastic and paper. On the other hand, most metals, especially some like copper and aluminum, are good conductors. Water is also an excellent conductor, which is why using electrical appliances near it requires great caution.
Electricity comes to us through a system with three parts: generation, transmission, and distribution. Behind me is a power generation station. It burns fossil fuels such as coal, oil, or natural gas, in this case coal. But the fuel source could also be water or a nuclear reactor.
These fuels are converted to electrical energy using generators. Recall that when electrons are forced to move from atom to atom, electricity is produced. Generating stations don't store electricity. Once produced, the electricity moves through a system of cables and wires from the power plant onto a transmission grid, where it is carried along wires strung on tall towers or poles. The voltage in these wires is extremely high, in the range of 60,000 to 500,000 volts.
The transmission lines eventually feed into substations like this. These are transformers, which reduce the voltage to lower levels, between 4,000 and 25,000 volts.
In most cases, the wires with the highest voltage are those at the top of utility poles. And keep in mind that most poles have other utility wires, such as telephone and cable. The voltage is still too high for practical usage inside buildings, so smaller transformers, either on utility poles or the ground, called pad-mounted transformers, lower the voltage to levels usable at home and in factories. The wires which extend from poles on the street to buildings are termed service drops.
At this point, electricity comes into homes at 120 and 240 volts.
Things which might draw the higher voltage are spas, air conditioning units, or clothes dryers. Most lights and small appliances operate at 120 volts. However, special industrial applications can require more power, usually 277 and 480 volts for their needs. We've all seen lightning flashes extending between the sky and the ground.
Electricity, whether from lightning or a power line, is seeking a place which has zero voltage, like the water containers reaching equilibrium. The term grounded is derived from the earth being at ground voltage, zero voltage.
Electricity energizes things. Whether it's a lightning bolt or a power line, both things are termed energized. A circuit is the path the current takes as it moves and includes all of the parts of the electrical system. We're taught at an early age to avoid being shocked from electrical outlets and appliances. But as a responder in an emergency situation, it's vital that you treat every potential source or conductor of electricity as if it were energized. Keeping this in mind could save a life, including your own. Only when a utility company's on-site expert informs you that they have de-energized the area can you assume the electrical hazards have been removed.
Okay, power's off.
When living things unintentionally become part of an electric circuit, in most cases, bad things happen. Here's a brief anatomy of an electric shock. The human body provides protection from electricity, but that protection is limited. The first line of defense is our skin. Let's return to the concept of resistance for a minute. Skin has high resistance to shock. Recall that resistance is measured in ohms, and dry, unbroken skin can have up to 50,000 ohms in resistance. But inside the body, which is more than 70% water, this resistance drops drastically to only 300 to 500 ohms. To measure the effect on the body, let's take common household voltage, 120 volts, and divide it by a resistance factor of 40,000 ohms, typical for human skin. The result of voltage divided by resistance is amperes, the amount of current which is flowing. Only here, the amount is so small, only 3/1000ths of an ampere, that it's termed a milliamp. Let's see how different current levels affect the body. Up to 1 milliamp of current produces a slight tingling sensation. A mild shock is felt up to 10 milliamps. Moving up to 25 produces a painful shock and muscular contractions. Over 25 will produce severe muscular spasms. And once a level of 50 is reached, ventricular fibrillation, which is irregular heartbeats, results. When a level of over 200 milliamps is reached, severe burning will take place. If sustained, because the body is mostly water and blood is fluid, it will actually boil at some point. Unfortunately, as voltage increases, the skin's ability to resist it decreases rapidly, and the outer layer can break down, so protection from current deteriorates even more. Other factors influence the severity of damage from an electric shock: duration, path through the body, and skin moisture. The first variable is duration. If a shock is brief, it may only be painful. But if sustained even at low current levels, it can cause irregular heartbeat or death. 100 milliamps with a duration of a few seconds could be fatal. And consider this: a small electric drill draws about 30 times as much current. Likewise, very high current entering the body for only a moment may not cause death, but any sustained exposure almost certainly will. The second factor is path. Which area of the body did the current pass through? If it traveled through the torso, the heart and lungs may be affected and stop functioning. If the path didn't go through the torso but through a limb, severe burn damage is a strong possibility, both inside and out. Any moisture on the skin drastically reduces resistance. And another deadly aspect of wetness is surface area. The more area in contact, the lower the resistance. Anytime someone has been shocked, there are any number of possible injuries which you may need to address. The most serious is cardiac arrest. Once certain the victim is not still in contact with any energized electricity, then treat the victim accordingly. When electrical shock traumatizes a nerve center in the brain, breathing often stops, and your response needs to be appropriate to the equipment and training you've been given.
Hi, my name's Nancy. I'm from the fire department. Are you okay?
It's essential to protect yourself from disease. Wearing safety glasses, gloves, and a mask helps provide this protection.
I'm going to give you some oxygen right now.
Current entering a body produces heat, which can cause damage at the entrance and exit points. Electrical burns are doubly dangerous because tissues and organs beneath the skin may also be burned. For any burn, The burning process must first be stopped. For a major burn, where skin has been destroyed, apply dry, sterile dressings. When a powerful electric current passes through air or gas and reacts with particles in it, an intense arc can result, instantly emitting huge amounts of radiation and ultraviolet light.
Hold on. Take your hands out of your eyes.
Exposed skin can be severely damaged, as if from an intense sunburn, as well as the eyes. Eye damage may not show up immediately, but symptoms to look for are burning or a sensation of sand irritation. Superficial skin burns are treated like a sunburn with cool compress. Typically, when someone such as a homeowner has a problem, that person will dial 911 to report it.
I'm concerned. There's a wire in front of my house. I can't get out. It's very dangerous. I don't know what to do.
I'll be glad to help you. The address, please?
Dispatch centers don't all handle emergency calls the same way, so it's impossible to generalize about who will be the first to respond. One might assign the closest emergency unit to the scene. Another may always assign the police, or it might be decided by the nature of the situation. What's important is that all responders coordinate their activities and take every precaution to protect lives, including their own. In most cases, a police officer will be at the scene fairly quickly and often makes the call back to the dispatch center reporting on the situation.
Just keep the public clear, keep people protected from there.
The utility company needs to be alerted to mobilize their responders. Because of the unseen dangers of electricity, it's prudent to have power company experts on hand. And with different agencies involved in many emergencies, don't assume the utility company has been notified. Make sure someone has made the call. When electricity is involved in an emergency situation, extreme precautions need to be taken. Anytime electrical wires are involved, always consider them to be live or energized. Otherwise, you could end up as a victim yourself. Caution begins in approaching the accident site. And here's a misconception to be aware of. Tires don't insulate you against shock, especially now that so many are steel-belted. Take a look around before you even think about getting out of your vehicle. There may be damaged wires which are close to breaking and falling, even though they're a considerable distance away from the accident area. Unless it's not possible, park on the side of the street opposite the power lines, a good distance away, at least the span of 2 utility poles. Observe everything you can that might be out of place in the area, including possible damage to utility poles. Also, high voltage lines can be small in size and easily missed, especially when visibility isn't good. If a storm has passed through, there might be energized lines caught in downed trees that you might not even notice without due diligence. There are times equipment like transformers and the severed ends of power lines will arc and spark. But most times this isn't the case. However, the potential danger is just as great. With this in mind, remember, don't touch any power line, regardless of whether it appears to be energized or not.
This applies to large and small wires. It's easy to make the assumption that a covered wire is insulated. It's coated, but not necessarily insulated. And that includes wires which you believe are television or cable TV and assume to be safe. These wires can be in contact with the electric wires and become energized. So hands off all wires is always the policy. Don't bet your life on being able to tell the difference.
When approaching any possible high voltage conductor, the ground may be energized, so leave a 30-foot circle of safety between you and where the wire contacts the ground. If you ever face the rare occurrence of a major transmission line emergency, the minimum safety zone needs to be extended to 100 feet. Any vehicle at the emergency using an extended aerial device, such as a fire truck's ladder, could contact a power line and become energized. The extension must not be closer than 10 feet from any overhead power line. And remember, wires always have the potential to energize and limbs when in contact. So along these lines, safe perimeters need to be established for public access.